Can you share a
Yeah,
little bit about your career with us?
yeah, absolutely. Thanks, AJ, and that was a great introduction. I grew up in the western suburbs of Sydney. I'm the second eldest of five children, and it's probably only in the last few years that I've reflected a little bit on growing up and how that sort of impacted my life. I was always compared to my older brother in some ways, but I finished school, went to year 12. I had the opportunity to go to university, and I was sort of a bit torn. I didn't really want to go to university. I'd had enough of school, but also didn't quite understand what university would mean. I had a dream of joining the military, and I applied for officer entry to join the military. And I remember getting the letter back from the recruiting agency, Defence Force Recruiting, telling me that I was educationally unqualified for the path of entry that I'd chosen. And I was a bit despondent about that. And I had a few jobs. I worked as a landscape gardener. I collected contaminated waste around Sydney for about 18 months. And then I worked as a plumber's labourer. And then I applied to join the police force, and I joined the New South Wales Police Force. And I graduated at the top of my class. I won what was called the Prep Medallion at the time. And when I won that, I thought about the letter that I'd got from the Defence Force Recruiting saying that I was educationally unqualified. And I thought, well, stick it up, you. I don't know. Can I do that on the? So I thought, yeah, no, that was pretty good.
Absolutely.
And I was quite proud of that achievement. And I spent a number of years in the New South Wales Police Force, and I worked in metropolitan Sydney, and then I moved out to a place called Wilcannia, which is out near Broken Hill. I spent 2.5 years there, and then I moved to Dubbo, and then I actually left the police and I worked for my former father-in-law in the automotive trade, selling motor vehicles, Mercedes-Benz, Nissan and Mazda. And a lot of people said to me, oh, that's a big change to go from policing into a sales role. And I thought about it, and I thought, well, yes and no. Whether you're a police officer or whether you're a person selling something, I think the core role or the core skill that you should have is communication. Being able to talk to someone and listen to someone and find out what their issues are and what their problems are. And I worked for my former father-in-law for 4 years, and then I went back to the police force and I spent another 10, 11 years in the police force. I worked in the hire patrol. I had no friends outside the police when I was in the hire patrol. No one likes to do the hire patrol.
No.
And then I took promotion to sergeant into professional standards, internal affairs. And when I was in internal affairs, I had no friends inside the police or outside the police. So I did that for a number of years, and then I left the police and I went into emergency management. And I worked for the New South Wales State Emergency Service. I responded to a number of incidents across the state, natural disasters, floods and storms, and assisted other emergency services in their combat roles. And then 5 years ago, I joined Safe Work New South Wales. And throughout those varied careers, whilst there's a background of compliance and regulation, the core skill, I believe, is communication, engagement with people.
And it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but being in a compliance and regulatory kind of environment means that you probably like a bit of structure or knowing what are the boundaries and that, and then can I just play amongst those?
Yeah. I am a person that likes a little bit of structure. I throughout my journey, I've probably relaxed that structure a little bit. One of the things on reflection, I think anyone that is in a leadership role, it's important to reflect, and you've probably spoken about that as part of the information that you delivered. And I was always very comfortable in the black and white, and learning that there are shades of grey. And sometimes the beauty is in the grey rather than in the black and white. And being comfortable in that grey is something that I've had to learn to be more comfortable with.
And it's interesting, this week I've been away in Coffs Harbour running a Manager to Leader program, exactly that, live, but with 30 guys who are all site supervisors and team coordinators for people running power, electricity for the state. And same sort of thing, they were saying when they were a manager, it was a lot about compliance and black and white and rules, but now they've got to be a bit more of a leader. They're not just a crew leading hand. They're now kind of a leader. They were saying, oh, there's a lot more grey. And they were also commenting how much more human stuff there was. So it's interesting that you say communication is the big part.
Yep. I think it's very easy in a role where, you've got to turn this switch on at this time, and you've got to do this, and you've got to do this, and it's almost like a checklist going through, and you can tick the box, so to speak. With a leadership role, you are, I think, engaging more with people, and when you involve people, it doesn't complicate it. It makes it more interesting and perhaps more challenging. I remember talking to a number of people over the years, and you'd ask them, as part of the engagement that I would do, I'd ask them how the job is and how their business is going, and they'd say, "Oh, it'd be a great job if I didn't have to do with people." And I remember many, many years ago, there was an ad for Westrac, who are the importers of Caterpillar equipment for Australia, and it was a television ad, and they showed all of the different equipment and all of the different things that they do, and the tagline at the end was, Westrac Caterpillar, you might think we're in the earth moving business, but at the end of the day, we're in the people business. Because everything that they do relies on people. Absolutely. Whether it's someone answering a phone at the customer service centre, sending a part, getting the right part, working on a machine, even operating the machine. As much as we're moving towards autonomous machinery and artificial intelligence, there's still a human element to all of that.
Yeah, 100%. So in all of that, I'm going to dig in a little bit more, and then I do want to talk a bit about some of the disaster management stuff as well. But first, in all of that, because the career path, I mean, you can see a theme, but there was a bit of some sidestepping, I guess. Did you ever, apart from the fact that you got that letter in the beginning and you knew you wanted to get into the Defence Force in the beginning, did you ever think, oh, I'm going to map out my career? Did you ever have a plan? Was it written down, or was it just, that sounds like a good opportunity?
Despite my desire for structure and having worked in very, what I would call regimented and structured roles, and again, it's only in the last period of time where I've reflected more deeply. I haven't had that plan. I haven't gone, when I joined the police force, I didn't sit down and go, one day I'm going to be the commissioner and make that my ultimate goal. And some people, everybody's different and everybody operates a different way. I look at my siblings and my brother's been quite, I would term, successful. And it's interesting when we get together and he looks at what I do and I look at what he does. And he says to me, I wish I had your lifestyle. And then I say to him, yeah, but I wish I had your lifestyle. And he's been very structured and very regimented, and he's been very determined and very goal-driven. And he's been CEO of multiple companies and multinational organisations. But no, I never sat down and mapped out a plan or a goal. It's almost like sometimes I think I've had my career on cruise control. Other times I've looked at things and gone, well, that looks interesting, I'll go and give that a crack.
Right. So sometimes the pedals to the metal and you're like, I'm driven, and other times I'm kind of comfortable where I am and this is good. So why rock the boat? Yeah. Interesting. And I guess sometimes that's through seasons in life, isn't it, as well? And even locations like where you live and all of those sorts of things.
Yeah. I've sort of learned or come to the position where I want to, I don't want to work. I don't want everything to be about work. I spent a number of years where that was the case. Everything was about work. I was very goal driven, paying off a mortgage, having the right house, having what I thought was the right house, or what the expectation I thought of society, that I had the right house and the right car and the white picket fence. But in doing that, I also lost myself. I think I lost track of what I truly and authentically wanted. yeah, it's an interesting thing to look back on.
Yeah, and seasons, right? Like I know you have children, so no doubt
Yep.
there was part of being a provider and doing the dad thing, I'm the man of the house and all of that.
Yeah. It's definitely seasons of life. Getting into the property market, meeting a partner, building a life, building a house, getting a mortgage. It's almost like you're on a treadmill of life. And sometimes I look back and I didn't necessarily, again, comes back to that goal setting and planning. And I didn't really know where I was headed or where I was headed, whether that was actually what I wanted and what I truly desired. It was more sometimes an influence and an external influence.
Yeah. And I'm curious at that time when work was full on and you were kind of like lost myself a little bit because I was really focused on career, how much free time did you have? How much joy and juiciness was there in your life?
I thought that I was doing the right thing by building a career, but in fact, what I was doing, and apologies for the background noise, what I was doing was burning myself out. I was so focused on work and trying to build a career that I wasn't re-energizing or rejuvenating myself. I think it's important now, and I try and do it as often as I can, to stop and find the things that bring you joy, that bring you happiness, that make you smile. And I mean, at the moment, I'm sitting in a beer garden of a pub that's not open. It's not an early opener. I haven't got a schooner or anything beside me.
No judgment.
But I'm sitting in the beer garden at a lovely the Globe Hotel in Ralston, and it's that transition time of between summer and autumn, and the leaves are starting to change on the deciduous trees, and they're changing colour, and it's noticing those little things, and appreciating that there's a butterfly that's flying around, noticing that's the sort of stuff that I didn't notice when I was focused on career. All I wanted to do was, work as much overtime as I could, pay as much off my mortgage as I could, and I wasn't living.
Yeah, you were making a living, but not a life.
No, yeah, I was making a living, but I wasn't making a life at all. And I look back, and it's easy to reflect. Hindsight's often 20/20 vision.
Yes.
But you look back and I think about potentially some of the things that I may have missed, and you don't want to dwell on the past and let that impact your future in a negative way and be stuck in the past. But just recognizing that there were opportunities there and making the most of the opportunities that I've got now.
Yeah. So can we switch gears a little bit? I wanted to go back to when you were talking about, you were in police force and that, but then you also were in emergency services and, actually being in charge or being a leader or manager in some description during times when there is a natural disaster, where there are, I know from being involved in some emergency situations myself, there is often a lot of different organizations, players, there's police, fire and ambulance, and then there's SES, and then there's local groups, and as well as businesses, community, all sorts of things. As a leader, how did you find you navigated those times, and what were some of the skills that you found you grew during those kind of times?
Great question. And I think one of the things that I learned, or definitely know that one of the things I learned, was understanding and communicating with the audience that you were talking with. There were times where the leadership style needed to be quite directive and authoritative. Other times the leadership style was more supportive, was more engagement, more encouragement, and it depended on the group that I was talking to. The communication style, for example, with another emergency service, particularly a paid emergency service, could be quite directive and quite firm and strong. I need you to do this, 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 and this. And they had the authority and the autonomy to go and do it. Basically, you were setting up a left and right boundary for them to operate in. How they did that was up to them. Then in another circumstance, you might be talking to a local community group. You couldn't walk in there chest puffed out thinking that you were the answer to all of their problems. It was more a collaborative, more engaging, more of a listening situation, and not dictating or telling them what you needed them to do, but encouraging them and taking them on a journey, letting them come up with the solution, and then facilitating the execution of that solution.
And very much something that we talk about in this program is that shift from the tell to the ask and the spectrum of that. And like you're saying, we talk about when it's compliance or in an emergency where time's of the essence, a tell might be necessary, but ideally, and I call it being an asshole, we eventually, as a leader, want to become more of an asshole where we're asking more questions and empowering others to think for themselves. But of course, you need a bit of time and spaciousness, and often you need to know your team in order to do that.
Yeah, one of the things that was quite a challenge, and I've observed it in myself and also in other people that have made the transition from, say, policing or defence into a largely volunteer organisation, is when you're dealing with a group of volunteers, they can turn around and tell you to shove it, the drop of the hat. Yes, they're involved in a hierarchical organisation, but they're not employed. They're volunteering their time, and the time is the most precious thing that I think anyone has got. And I used to talk about building up or making deposits of goodwill with the people, so that in times of disaster or where time is of the essence and you need something done quickly, you can draw on that bank of goodwill. And I think it's very similar in a leadership role, in a team, and even in an employed situation, because not every organisation is a hierarchical or they don't rely on someone with a title or authority. It's about leadership, and it's about engagement, and it's about being, and I'll use your term, an ask-hole.
Yes.
And making sure that people have got the skills to do what you're asking them to do. They have the support of the organisation and from you as a leader. I remember one quote, and I can't remember who it was, but a good leader in times of when things are going bad, stands in front of the group to take the badness and protect them. But in times when things are going well and the team has succeeded, stands behind them so that the team can take on all of that adulation or praise.
Oh, I love that. I like that concept of in front or behind. Like we do hear about a leader taking the hit for the team kind of, but I like that visual of whether they're standing in front or behind. And it's interesting. I had some feedback earlier in my career that was a bit confronting and like, wow, okay, I have to look at myself here. And the thing that came to me was, what's it like to be on the other side of me? The receiving of my instructions when I was a bit too authoritative. And I don't have the beautiful boomy radio voice you have. So, my authority didn't have that behind it.
I've always said that if I can't be professional, I can at least look and sound professional.
Yeah. Well, visual is a big part. What I'd love you to share is if you've got any stories or examples from in those times when you were growing your leadership skills, what was a couple of the challenges, or did you have any challenges in that, shifting into a bit more leadership from just being, say, a police officer that was, on the highway, freeway, whatever, to actually being in a position where you did have to lead and manage others? What were some of the challenges you faced?
One of the biggest stories that sticks, or one of the biggest memories that I have that sticks with me to this day, I was actually, I was out at the police force in between, I had two goes, and I was working for my former father-in-law, and as I mentioned, I was selling new cars, and as you highlighted, I highly polished boots, and everything looks nice and clean, and go to deliver a new car, and it would come out from the detailers, and I would look and I'd see a water spot, or there'd be a speck of dust in the car, and I'd be out there and I'd be cleaning it and making sure it was Mickey Mouse. And my former father-in-law came out one day and said to me, "Phil, what's going on? You got the shits." Is that all right to say? Shits. Yep. You look upset. You look cranky. What's wrong? And I said, "Oh, these details. They get paid to do a job, and the cars come out and they're all dirty." And he said, "What do you mean?" And I said, "Well, there's a watermark there, and there's some dust there." And he said, and this concept has stuck with me for a long time. What makes you think? And my father-in-law said to me, "What makes you think they feel they're not doing their best? Just because their best is at a different level to where you perceive your best to be, doesn't mean that they aren't doing their best."
Right.
And that was a bit, well, yeah, okay, I need to dial that down a little bit. And then the other thing he said to me was, go and have a conversation with them, not in a confrontational way, but find out, is there something else going on in their life that you don't know about? Because despite the fact that people go to work for 8 hours a day or more, they have lives outside of work, and those things can impact the job that they're doing, and what they're doing at work. So that was a big lesson.
I'm hearing understanding standards there, and that different people have different standards, or what that looks like. And as a leader, it's super important that we have absolute clarity when we communicate. That is, that people understand. So you can't really have a go at someone about the dust or the water spot if you haven't already pre-established what does perfect look like. And that often happens in teams, and lots of managers I see where they're like, "I instructed and asked for this, but I got that." And you're like, "Did you check if people understood the picture of this?" I worked with a property investor once, and he had a standard where if there was ever any of his buildings, and he had largely commercial buildings, ever a spot of graffiti, he had a 24-hour rule. It has to be off within 24 hours. But if he hadn't communicated that, his team might go, "I'll get to that next week." And he was the sort of person who would rant and rave, he saw it. So it's that really being clear about what are the standards.
And another example, working when I was with the State Emergency Service, talking about building up that or making those deposits of goodwill, going out and visiting the units and engaging with them during, and I'll use the term peacetime, when things aren't going on, and showing interest in them as individuals, asking them and understanding and knowing that if they're willing to share information about their kids and their family, wives, what they're doing in their lives outside of SES when they're volunteering, remembering that and showing interest in that, because they're the things that motivate those people. Understanding what is it that ticks the boxes for that individual. How they might have I've worked in regional areas, so a lot of the volunteers worked on properties or owned agricultural properties. So understanding what was going on in terms of the weather or the markets for the commodity that they may have been involved in, whether it was wheat or cattle or sheep, asking them about prices and things, understanding what their kids might have been doing, and being authentic and genuine in those inquiries, not just so that you could tick a box, but actually having a conversation with them.
Being a bit
knowing the people. Being human.
So I want to kind of, as we start rounding out, flip back to when we talked about you losing yourself a little bit, and when your focus was on work maybe, and a bit less on what made you smile, like your butterfly that flew past earlier. The burnout part, how did you experience it? And were there signs for you in your leadership journey that, oh, I'm actually going down the slope? Or was it not until you were against the wall that you realized? So lots of people on here have experienced some of that, or are starting to feel the stress and pressure as they've moved up. And so,
Yeah.
you know, I'm really conscious always that people listen in here, not just for tips and things that they can do, but also for mindset and clues of, oh, you know, maybe I'm experiencing a bit of that as well. So without diving into a counseling session, but I'd love to know, you know, how did you experience burnout? Did you know when it showed up, or was it after that it showed up and you went, oh, there were signs, but I ignored them?
Well, I had a counselling session with my mates at the Denman Hotel last night, so I'm pretty good at the moment.
Okay, good. And a good
I'm not,
ride to wash away cobwebs. Yeah.
and an excellent motorcycle ride. But no, that's a great question, and I would say that by looking back on it, I can see the signs now, but at the time I was just blind and blinkered to it,
Right.
and those signs were I lost enjoyment in the things that I used to get enjoyment out of.
Right.
I was tired, cranky, disinterested,
Mm,
demotivated.
mm,
Um, hate is a strong word, but the common term is, you hated the world, and you'd wake up and everything was just negative and bad. Um, and I would find myself taking offence or umbrage at the slightest little thing,
mm.
and I would be fixated or focused on that particular thing, and I wouldn't be able to let it go. And that's that, for me, looking back, they're the signs that I now look for. When I stop enjoying things, I become demotivated. I don't go out and do the things that I used to do. Become a little bit isolated and insular,
Right.
and start to fixate on little things. Yeah, they're the signs for me. And then trying to get yourself out of that. That's another journey as well.
Yeah. And have you ever utilized services like EAP or things like that? Or did you find you had a good confidant or a manager or someone who could be a bit of a sounding board for you?
I've been lucky. I've had good managers and good friends that have recognised when I have been in that state, and they've said to me, "Hey, Phil, what's going on? There's something not right."
Mm,
Um, I have used EAP as well, and I'm a big advocate for seeking help, for want of a better term,
yeah.
seeking assistance, finding someone to go and have a chat to.
Yeah.
That can be the world of difference, and it's made a huge difference for me.
Yeah.
Finding that confidant, even I enjoy reading, finding a book to read, getting motivated, and sometimes it is difficult. Getting motivated to go and do the things and find the enjoyment in the things that you had previously enjoyed. Riding the motorcycle, for example, taking photos,
Yeah.
writing blogs, for want of a better term, about my adventures.
Yeah.
Finding a great bakery and a meat pie and a custard tart. Little simple
Always.
things.
Body things
Little
are
simple,
good, right? You know, a good
yeah,
custard tart can make you feel good.
yeah.
As long as you're not having 10 a day, perhaps.
And that takes, I suppose, it goes on to another thing, is exercise.
Mhm.
That's been a massive thing for me. Getting out and regular exercise,
Yeah.
whether it's going for a walk or going to the gym, or you don't have to become Arnold Schwarzenegger, but just movement, getting the
Mm.
body moving. I did find that when it started to slide down, that becoming demotivated, then you wouldn't get up and do stuff. You wouldn't go out and ride the motorcycle or go for a walk or ride your push bike. So being active is definitely something
Huge.
that is good. Yeah,
And there's loads
yeah,
of research that backs that up in lots of ways. You know, the saying energy flows where attention goes. When we don't move, our attention goes inward. And so we
yeah,
actually just fester on things. But when we do movement, it shifts our energy outwards and moves our blood and our oxygen around our body. And so our attention naturally moves outside of ourselves, which allows
yes,
us to get that perspective that we often don't
yeah,
when we're in tight. So there's
100%.
loads we've covered here, and I love that you've had a career that's gone like this and been in all different aspects. And I guess on the burnout piece, and I won't talk shop with you, you know, as far as you are an inspector for safe work, but I know that psychosocial is becoming a huge thing and is now, you know, going to be more regulated than it ever was in the
Yes.
past. And so I
Yep.
think as managers and leaders, it's important that we're technically really proficient, but the human side, as you're saying, understanding humans, the way they think, being able to communicate, you know, is obviously equally as important. And I
Yeah.
love that you can hear the balance of that in what you've done in your career.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, from my time in the police, and I had a very good, couple of very good bosses when I was in the police, and I remember one of them saying to me, productivity is directly related to morale, and morale is directly related to productivity. I think if you've got good productivity, there's a greater potential for good morale, and if you have low productivity, it's when people start to find stuff to complain about, or not get engaged with, and not think about, and they start looking at the little things and getting fixated on that. And it's important to understand or to recognize the value in even stopping. And not everything is about productivity or getting the last dollar out of the product that you're making or selling. You're dealing with human beings, and if you've got productive humans around you, you've got a greater chance of success. And recognizing that taking 5 minutes to inquire how someone's day is and being genuinely interested in what's going on in their lives, where they allow it. Obviously, you don't want to. There's definitely a professional distance to keep in mind. But being interested and authentic in the people around you or the people that you're leading makes a huge difference. And that's something, looking back on my career, when I've had leaders that have a genuine interest in what I'm doing, I've felt more valued. I felt more like contributing and going, rather than just turning up and filling a seat, going above and beyond.
Well, so well said. And there's great research by the Gallup organization that has a bell curve from people who are actively disengaged to engaged to actively engaged. And it always shows that the manager has such a big influence on how actively engaged we are. So you've reflected that beautifully. So we've gone kind of full circle to close out, I guess, from being labeled in your little letter educationally unqualified. Gosh, how harsh is that? How inhumane is that?
Not that I'm carrying any baggage. It was 30 years ago, but I can still remember it very vividly.
From that to where you're at now, where you've done all these great things, what's shifted now? How's life and work now? Like, what's the perspective you have looking back now?
Yeah. I was pretty devastated when I got that letter, thinking, what am I going to do with my life and where's it going to go? And my dreams have been shattered. And I think, where one, okay, for want of a better term, you might say it's a roadblock. One roadblock is presented. The challenge is to find the detour around to get to where you want to be and to what you want to do. When I got that letter, I shifted to join the police force, and then the police force, I went into sales, and then back to the police force, and then into emergency management, and still working in a compliance and regulatory role now. Because you get a rejection or you get a roadblock doesn't mean it's the end. It's looking and having the perspective to go, well, okay, how else can I get to my end goal? I've got, as I said, I've got a couple of kids, and my daughter wanted to do law commerce at University of Sydney. And this was 2 years ago, and she got an ATAR of 98.4. And to get into law commerce at University of Sydney, she needed 99.5.
Oh gosh.
And so she missed out by 1.1 marks. And I remember having a conversation with her and saying, you know, this is just because you didn't get in this way doesn't mean it's the end of that dream.
Mm.
What other ways can you get to do law commerce?
Mm.
And you know, she was admitted into every other institution, university, for law commerce, but she wanted to do it at University of Sydney. So she made inquiries and she got accepted into commerce at University of Sydney, and they said to her, if you achieve a distinction grade point average for the first year, we will allow you to go or offer you the opportunity to transfer into law commerce. She did it. She's now in a second year. She's doing law commerce, and it's finding that avenue or that way to get where you want to be. The other thing I would say is that just because someone tells you something or puts a label on you, you don't have to accept that label. You don't have to let that label or that status define who you are and what you do. And there's lots of cliches and quotes and things about it. It's what being concerned about. You can't control what someone thinks about you. You can control how you respond to it. That's the important thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So well said. And wow, sounds like your daughter is kicking goals. I hope she loves what she's doing. And
yeah.
it really is what you're saying. You know, I think the leadership ladder is dead and a career lattice, you know, where it's like,
yes.
I could go sideways. And sometimes it's even good to go down in another organization in order to find stuff. And as much as time is a precious resource, for those who are in the program that are under 35, I'm like, you have all the time in the world. Like in your first 10 or 15 years, try everything you can in order
Absolutely.
to go, no, I don't like that. I don't like that. Like there's time.
My
to try things.
Sorry, my grandmother, and I had a really special bond with both my grandmothers, and one of my grandmothers said to me, education is no burden to carry. And she said, not necessarily the education you get at school or university, but the education you get through life. So, as I said before, I collected contaminated waste from pathology labs and hospitals and vets across Sydney when I first left school. And the education that I got there was how to navigate my way around the traffic of Sydney, how to, customer service engagement, and those things. And that then provided me when I joined the police force. I knew how to get around places. I knew how to talk to people, which was again built upon when I went into sales. And like we said before, whatever we do, really, we're in the people business.
100%. And I love the story about Steve Jobs when he started Apple earlier in his career. Before he got into Apple, he'd actually done a calligraphy course.
Yes.
And really loved fonts and calligraphy. And so that's why we have fonts on computers now, because originally they were just like typewriter style. And he was the one that introduced on the Apples having all these different fonts because he'd done calligraphy. So imagine if he hadn't done that, we'd all be still Times New Romaning everything.
I prefer Arial Bold myself, or Garamond.
I'm a Calibri. Calibri, is it?
Yes.
So final question, if you might, and thank you, and gratefully, hopefully the pub doesn't open soon and they boot you out. What are you most grateful for?
I'm grateful to wake up every day and immerse myself in the things around me, whether it's raining, whether it's sunny. There is the opportunity. I'm most grateful for having the opportunity to see the beauty in everything around me. I'm grateful for my kids. They're all cliche. They're cliche things, but it's understanding and appreciating for me that it's not the title that I have. It's not the money in the bank that I have that matters. It's the opportunities to have experiences like at the moment, on a motorcycle ride with a couple of mates. Yes, You need to have a job to do all of those things, but um, I work to fund my lifestyle. Work is not everything.
Yeah. And that's so refreshing to hear, especially when you're working in the government, right? And in a regulator in particular. I know lots of people in this program say the red tape and the frustrations of all of that. But at the end of the day, we work to create a life. And, so wonderful to see that that's where you're at in your career.
It's taken a journey.
Yeah. And I hope it's inspired some people listening to reflect on themselves if they're finding they're in a bit of that burnout phase or in the stage of life where work maybe has become a bit too all-consuming. And I know certainly we talk here about building your career, but doing that in a sustainable way. And I know myself from experiencing burnout that I wouldn't wish that on anyone. For everyone who is listening, before you go, I want you to stop and pause and get a notepad and pen and think about what are some of the little shifts that I could make right now in my career, having listened to Phil's story. What are some things that you're like, I recognized a bit of myself, and to write those down. So what are the mindset kind of things, and maybe what's something practically that I could actually apply? And I encourage you not to listen to another podcast or read another book or do anything until you've taken those actions. So I'm always really keen to say, you're in this curriculum for at least 6 months, marinate in it and don't move on to just the next topic until you've really reflected on what Phil shared and you've gone, okay, this is what I want to apply, and try that out for a little bit first. So don't worry about rushing through stuff. Really sit, and it's in the application that you will get the gold as well. So thank you, Phil, for sharing. Thank you for taking a pause out there at Ralston in the pub grounds and chatting to us today. It's been fantastic. And I hope you fly, I think your shirt says, but not too fast on the bike today, or some of your friends might pick you up.
Yeah, no, it's been great, AJ, and I think one of the other things is with in a leadership role, it's surrounding yourself with good people. I think it was Jack Welch that said, as the leader of GE, and GE do everything from MRI machines to jet engines. When he goes into a meeting, he wants to be the dumbest person in the room.
Yeah.
It's surrounding yourself with good people, and probably the biggest thing for me about leadership is it's not the title that you have, it's not the position that you have, it's the influence that you have, and everybody has the opportunity to be a leader, whether it's at work, whether it's in your family, in community, and you don't need to be elected, or you don't need to be a team leader. You don't need to hold a position of authority to be a leader.
Absolutely. We all cast a leadership shadow. The taller the tree, the bigger the shadow, and you don't need a title to do that. Yeah, no. Absolutely. But you do need a forest around you.
Absolutely. So it's people around you, most definitely.
Yeah. Well, enjoy safe riding, and I look forward to watching the photos of your travels online on socials, because you always take amazing photos. Thank you so much for your time, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and we will meet again next month. Thank you.
Cheers. Thanks, everyone.
But wait, just when you thought it was over, Phil just shared a couple of bits of gold with me right after we finished. So go for it, Phil.
I think it's not about just a paycheck. When you're a leader, it's about understanding what motivates people. And for me, the things that I reflect on is when I've felt valued, when I've felt like I've contributed, and when people have been interested. That's the thing that has been motivating for me. So as a leader, I always try to think beyond just the fact that someone's doing a job or is paid to do a job, but making sure that they feel valued, that you show interest in what they're doing, and you thank them for their contribution.
Awesome. So just like in the movies, where sometimes you wait till after the credits and the gold comes out. Thanks for sharing.
No worries.